Welcome back to 3B Farm. We're here for another week to see what we can get accomplished this week. I have some outside jobs, so I'm not sure how much we're going to get done this week, but welcome back to week 2 on 3B Farm. So this time of year I start to get a bug. You know, everything isn't turning green yet, but I wish it would. I'm gonna have the bug too to get out of the house, I guess. You know, all the snow and the bad weather we had for weeks, it really works on me. And then I come out here when the snow is melted and I see everything that needs to be done. And you know, it's kind of overwhelming, but at the same time I'm looking forward to getting out here and doing a bunch of it. So anyway, stay tuned for this week's segment of 3B Farm and we'll see what we can get accomplished this week. Now, just walking around and surveying some of the winter and finding some of the damage, there was one set of irrigation pipes that I didn't get thawed, and you can see that just, you know, there was a few things here that just, you know, froze inside and busted the PVC. PVC is just not meant to overwinter and with water in it. I normally drain everything. Now, one of the things I want to work on are all my water wands. This is just part of them here, but by the end of the year, each year, when I'm watering, you know, I'm just getting soaking wet. And this hose end here, you know, I always take these off before the winter because the winter always blows these out, but somebody left it on, so it's gone bad. And the hose ends, you know, these breaker heads, a lot of times if you don't get water out of them, they'll blow the end of the breaker heads out. And some of my wands have just, you know, just over time just have oxidated and gone bad. So a couple of these have holes in it like this that I need to work on. And you know, one of the things you need to do too, you know, here's one that's broken, but always use brass valves instead of plastic valves, because plastic valves will blow out in a heartbeat worse than anything. So some of these that have little holes in the middle, I'm just going to cut these and take the parts with holes off the hoses and reuse the wands. I try to repair everything the best I can and to save money. And some of these, you know, just have fittings in the end, and once I cut that off and clean up all the tape or whatever I had on it to keep it halfway sealed through the end of the year last year, I can come back and put a 2-part epoxy on this and then put it back together, and it'll seal well enough that, you know, I can go ahead and reuse this as next year, and hopefully it won't be putting water all down the lower half of my body by the end of the year. But to make sure the epoxy adheres really good, you really have to clean the metal and get everything nice and shiny and bright. If you leave any oxidation or crud or anything in there, the epoxy just is not going to do its job. And this one, you know, I also have a pipe clamp on this one that was there before. So I think once I get this all re-glued back together, I'm just going to go ahead and reuse the pipe clamp on this one as well, just to give it a little extra strength and support. But by the time I get this 2-part epoxy mixed up and on there and everything back together, you know, it really does not wiggle around after it sets up, and it feels like a good strong connection. So hopefully this is one of those that won't be getting me soaking wet. You know, by the end of the summer, it really doesn't bother me that bad to get a little wet anyway, but it's just better to be, you know, dry versus wet when it comes down to it than me liking life. You know, half the time by the end of the summer, I'm working halfway barefooted anyway. Now, as I go through and do all these repairs, all of these little rubber washers and all the spray heads, the valve assemblies at the back of the wands and everything, I just go ahead and replace all these. You can see this one here was dry rotted and breaking up, and I replace these every year. You know, I try not to take these apart and put them back together off and on, But here's one that just is totally, oxidated at the end of the hose. There's really not a whole lot of hope for this. One thing you can do is if you can find a hose that's just a little bit better than the metal pipe, you can sometimes take the hose and clamp it with a pipe clamp over these and use that. Sometimes you can get these hose ends, repair kits, and sometimes the brass or whatever you use, and it's small enough to slip inside the hoses, but on this one that just did not work. And the other thing, sometimes these breaker heads, they just, after a period of time, the plastics just start breaking down in ultraviolet light. And the rubber on this one came unglued, so it's all wanting to come apart. And, I'd like to get another year or two out of these. These are very expensive when you go to buy the stupid things. And where some of the red plastic's missing that's holding the metal in one end, I just come back and put some glue across that area. And then I'm just going to put glue around the whole outside edge where this rubber comes and seats down over that edge to hold it into place. I feel pretty confident that I'll get at least another year out of this. It'd be nice to get a couple of years, but you do what you got to do. I try to make everything last as long as I can because I don't have a whole lot of money just to go out and buy new stuff all the time. So when I'm done, I have this many wands that I can start the year with, and that's one project off my wintertime repair list. Now, while the snow was melted off, I did go out and find a bunch of my different plug trays and flats. I have flats with holes and then flats without holes and all these different numbers of cell trays. And I found a couple of varieties that I want to use, and these real small trays, which are just around 400 cells in these, I'm going to use these for all my flowers because I don't want to put a bunch of stuff in a cell and have to break it up later on. I just want to transplant these small cells into larger cell packs eventually to go to market. And I don't always clean everything, and sterilize everything, but I like doing that with seed trays. Probably nothing else you'll ever see me do this with. But in seed trays, it really is beneficial, and I just use 1 part Clorox to, however much water. I really didn't measure this. They recommend a 10-to-1 water and then 1 part Clorox. These larger cell trays, I am going to start multiple seeds in this and then break them apart as I move them into cell trays, and I'll be using these for all my vegetables. Now in the last video you saw the soil that I had pre-mixed outside and brought inside to thaw out, and at this point it's been inside for a while, so its temperatures are really quite usable. It's still a little dry, it's got some moisture in it, but I'm just going to come through and go ahead and start filling the plug trays that I'm going to use to start this original stuff. And I'm just filling them up to the top, and I'm coming back and I'm pressing them down lightly. I'm trying not to compact these real tight into the cells, because if you do, they really have a harder time for the seedlings to root down into them. And I'm going to make dimples in the top of these to place the seeds too, so I don't really want to compact these that much at all. And you can see both the different types, the large and the small cells here. And I'm going to do 4 of each of these types right now to start all my seeds in. So then I just take the table to the table, and I'm just coming through and making little dimples in the tops of all these cells. And this just gives the seeds something to set down in. Most all the flower seeds and everything I'm using, except for the marigolds, are just little tiny specks of seeds. And seeds you really only want to plant about twice the size of the seed in depth. So you can see these marigolds are not small, but they're real flat. And I've just put these on an envelope and come through with a piece of plastic and sliding them off this plastic into the hole. I found that this is easier to do than me trying to pinch a bunch and go through and just manually put 1 at a time in a cell. And I'm putting a couple in each cell. I'm not just doing 1 because I have multiple seeds, and I'm going to make them go as far as they can, but they're going to do more than fill up this flat. So if I get 2 in each cell and all of them don't germinate, then chances are I'm still going to have at least 1 germinate per cell in the tray. The tests on the packet said that there was pretty high germination rate, but And to make tags for these little cells, I take window blinds and I cut them up to make tags out of. And that way you can cut them to any size. And I normally cut, 6-inch lengths for containers and stuff like that. But for these little tiny cells, I can even cut these in half lengthwise and use them for markers in my cell trays. And then what I'm going to come do is just come back and top dress all these with vermiculite on top. I found that by using vermiculite on top, it holds a lot of moisture. It still doesn't off-place so much oxygen that you get anaerobic growth, but it definitely holds a lot of moisture right on top where the seed is at, and you don't want your seed drying out or they won't germinate. So then, I mark these in two ways. You saw me put a little tag in the flat itself, but also in the flat that I set these down in that are waterproof, I also put markings on them as to what is in each of those trays. And you can just see some of the varieties here that I'm going through and doing. There's a couple different flats of marigolds. There's verbenas. There's Gerber daisies. I don't know, remember all of everything. There's celosia and geraniums. I've got a couple of different types of begonias in these. There's some coleus in some of these. Nasturtiums. I like nasturtiums and the marigolds because they're good to put in with your vegetables in the garden. The nasturtiums are edible, but both of them will draw beneficial insects that will keep other insects out of your annuals, especially your veggies and stuff like that. So I like using them in with my vegetables. There's also some impatiens in these and, a few other things, but mainly that's all the flowers that I'm doing, and those are all in those real small cells. And then in the larger cell packs, I'm doing just cold season stuff right now. I still have some cauliflower coming in, so I'm really not getting started until that last pack comes in this week into a whole tray of 3 different of cauliflowers. But in the cabbages, I have half a tray of Savoy, half a tray of Brunswick. I also have all season and Rent Acre. And I'm putting multiple cells in each one of these big ones. And then as they germinate, when I get ready to put these into cell packs, I'll just break these apart and add individual ones that have germinated into my cell packs. And then I've got 4 different types of broccoli. But once I get all those trays done, I'm going to come back and put them into the growing area that I showed you before. Underneath the flowers, though, I'm also going to add a heating mat. And basically, this one is 10 feet long, and you have to put a screen on top of it as part of a grounding thing. And I found out by putting this together, the screen is a little bit wider than the mat, so you can tack it down if you're on plain wood on either side of it, because you don't want to put holes through the mat itself. And once I got setting all this up, I found out that my controller for the heating mat is not made for these mats. And I'm not sure if something's wrong with it. I bought this a long time ago, and it just doesn't want to set everything the way it's supposed to set everything. And then I add the light timer into the circuit on the back as well and plug all the growing lights in it. And I like these timers here that you can set on an individual half-hour to an hour basis. That way you can set it up for 5 hours, 10 hours, 14 hours, or whatever you want to set it up. But then when I get all that done, basically I have everything started that I'm going to start this week, and all the shelves are completely set up to where I can grow on more and more and more. I do go through, and all these lights I put right down on top of the humidity domes. There was a couple other things I was going to get started on this week. I want to get some of this fencing up. I'm putting 8-foot fencing up around this area for an arbor. I do have one roll of wire back here. It's only a 3-foot cattle type fence wire, but it's 350 feet long. I wish it was 4 foot, but it's not. So I'm going to use this and put 4-foot fence above this, and at least I'll have a 7-foot fence. I've not known deer to go over 7 feet. Even 6 feet really pushes it with deer. I have seen them go over 6 foot, although it is a rare thing. So I'm just loading this stuff up because it's too heavy for me to carry. And thank God Mom has a tractor here on the farm. So, I'm going to go ahead and deliver this over there to that area. And then I'll be ready to put the bottom row of wire on. And then I'm also going to go ahead and get chicken wire. I'm going to use chicken wire, a 4-foot strand, for the roll above where this wire is here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that after I get the tractor out of the way here and go ahead and get the chicken wire there. So that's all the wire for this fence. Now, I really didn't get a start on putting the wire up this week, so hopefully the temperature's going to be really cold this next week. We'll see if I can get into this or not. The other thing I kind of got a start on but didn't get finished is I have these air prune boxes. And basically, these have 1/4-inch screen on the bottom of this. And I have all these bags of decayed mulch that I removed out of garden beds last year. And they do have a little debris in them, so you got to clean that out. But I'm going to use this to put some stuff in and let it finish wintering outside. You can see how broke down this is. It's really nice stuff. The other issue I found while I was walking around the nursery is these are Jerusalem artichokes here. And underneath some of my fabric, where all the rodents love to live in the wintertime, they started ripping these out of the ground. So I just went ahead and took these artichokes up and cleaned them off so I can use them later on. I might sell some of them for seedling artichokes this next spring. But I don't know, we'll figure out what I'm going to do with them at some point in time. So there you have week 2 on 3B Farm. Would have liked to have got a whole lot more accomplished this week, but I had other things going on, and there was a couple of days that the weather just was pretty lousy, although we had a couple nice warm days too. Anyway, a couple of things on here. That fence, I was hoping to get at least the bottom row of that fence on that area that I'm going to turn into an orchard out there. But anyway, we'll go into that then this next week. And those air prune boxes, I'll explain a little bit more about those next week. A lot of people, I guess, don't really understand what air pruning boxes are. So we'll go into that more this next week. But it was nice to get some seeds done. I've been basically about a week behind where I was on getting seedlings started. And I'm really happy to get those started. I didn't grow flowers last year. The geraniums and nasturtiums I'm really looking forward to adding into my own garden as well. They really are beneficial to plant around vegetables and that type of thing. They bring in beneficial insects, and the scents that they put off kind of discourage, well, they don't discourage, but I guess they hide the scents of some of the fruit and stuff, so the bugs don't know they're there. They kind of hide them. That makes them incognito. But the nasturtiums are edible as well. They kind of have a peppery taste, the flowers and the leaves. You can add them into salads and they're really quite nice. So anyway, it was nice to get all those done, and the shelves totally finished to the point where I can put stuff on it and grow. The heat mat I'm not sure about. The controller that I got definitely was not made for this particular heat mat. The screen that I put on top of them is supposed to have a ground wire that goes to the controller in case something happens and something shorts out, it shuts down the circuit. And this controller does not have that hookup going to it. I may go ahead and run a ground off of that screen just into the ground plug of the regular electric coming to this circuit, so that if something does go bad, at least it'll shut the breaker off at the house. You don't need electrical fires. You need to be careful with this kind of stuff. I mean, it is brand new, so I don't foresee any immediate problems in them. I hope they'll last 5 to 10 years or more. But I do have to check into the controller for that. I couldn't get it to set the temperature either. It's set at 80 degrees right now, and I don't really want to run the flowers that warm. I'd like to see them about 72, 74 degrees maybe. At 80 degrees, I've really got to watch how quick the moisture those little tiny cells, they'll dry out really quick. So I may have to, you know, water them morning and evening instead of once a day the way I'd probably normally would. But the vegetables, these are cold season vegetables, so they'll be fine without a heat mat under them. And what I did last year was once I moved the cold season plants into cell packs down onto those lower shelves and started filling those up, then the lights came on those lower shelves, and the heat from the LEDs actually heats up the shelf above it slightly. And that was plenty warmth for the tomatoes, peppers, you know, anything else that I started as a later summer or later spring sowing crop. So, you know, once these cold season crops come out, the heat mat can come out of there altogether anyway. I didn't realize they were quite 10 foot. I bought these probably a year and a half ago, and I probably knew it when I bought them how long they were, but when I was building that other set of shelves, I wasn't thinking about them being that long and thinking they were smaller mats and I could use them in that other wooden set of shelves that I built as well, but that will not work. I do have, you know, those 2 foot that are unlit at the end of those shelves. I do have some LED strip lights, and I bought those a few years ago to originally use in the shelving unit, and I just was very unhappy with them. I just didn't feel they were enough lumens to do what I wanted to do. These 4 foot fixtures I got now are 5,500 lumens, so that's plenty of light to grow seedlings underneath of. But I'm thinking about taking that strip light and using it underneath each of those 2 foot sections that are unlit on the ends of each of those shelves. I'm growing more than I did last year. There was plenty of room without getting into that 2 foot section last year, but this year, you know, I'd like to use that 2 foot section on all 4 of those shelves and the new wooden shelves. I mean, I've really beefed up the amount that I'm growing this year, so I would like to use that space. So I may dig up some of those LED strips and see if I can halfway decently put them in there. They don't draw much wattage, so I can probably add them onto the same circuit and be safe with that. And by then the heat mat will be off the circuit. By then I won't need the heat mat either, so that's less wattage that will be drawn on the same circuit, so it should be perfectly safe. So in any case, I appreciate you coming back and sharing this time with me. We'll get into some more of these things. We kind of gave you a taste of this week in next week's video. It's supposed to snow maybe even one day next week. I don't think we're going to get any major accumulation, but the temperatures are going to be cold most of the week. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to get done outside. I'm writing a grant too. I was in the Navy for a number of years, and a lot of the veterans programs and stuff that I have do offer grants for new farms. And since this is a new farm, at least to me, you know, I can probably get a grant. At least I'm going to write a proposal for a grant to see if I can get some funding for some of the things I've got coming up, because there's a whole lot to build on this farm yet. So anyway, subscribe to my channel, press the like button at the bottom if you would. It would help my analytics and get me out there a little bit better. Just getting started. I'd like for a few people to start finding me out there and start watching my videos. Maybe they can learn something from them. In any case, thanks again, and let's pray for spring.